Hello, and welcome to a special bonus episode of the Telescope Show. So glad that you are hanging out today and checking out this special bonus episode. On this episode, I interview the host of the DeVaney Music Podcast, Ian DeVaney. It's a conversation for the music nerds out there. It's a little different than our normal content. That's why we decided to release it as a bonus episode. It's a lot of fun. We talk about all kinds of things in the music world. Ian's got some cool experience. But why am I telling you about it? Let's jump into the conversation with Ian DeVaney. Well, I am on the phone right now with fellow music nerd, Mr. Ian DeVaney. Hi, Ian.
Hey, Matt. How's it going?
It is going pretty well. The sun is out here in Winona.
It's kind of like that here, too. It's sunny. It's probably 60 degrees.
Yeah.
I almost sat outside, but I'm sitting in kind of a coffee shop right now.
Nice. Well, Ian has a podcast called the DeVaney Music Podcast. Ian went to college for music business and has been a concert promoter for a long time. So, Ian, thanks for being on the show. It's a little bit of a different twist on being a nerd today, but I think music nerd is a nerd, right?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And if anyone is a music nerd, then I am wholeheartedly.
Yes. So, Ian, what made you fall in love with music?
So that's kind of a funny question because I know when I was a kid, like a young kid, like in elementary school, I really didn't think music was cool for some reason. And I think probably part of that was because in my house, I just wasn't really exposed to music that I liked or would like. My mom listened to kind of the standard Christian worship music that was on the radio and stuff at the time, or that she had on cassette. And that never appealed to me very much. And then I had an older brother, or have an older brother, Leif, who's 10 years older than me. And he listened mostly to death metal.
Talk about extremes.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, well, you played in Godhead and Manhood, right?
Yes.
Which wasn't death metal, but it was hardcore.
It's
I
pretty
remember
heavy.
He saw you guys. So he listened to that, which I wasn't really into as a kid. And then my sister listened to really, really bad pop music, like Jump 5 or whatever.
Okay.
If anyone knows who they are. But if you don't, you could always torture yourself and look them up on YouTube, but otherwise it's just bad, generic, girly pop music. So
yeah, just take our word for it. You don't want to do that to yourself.
Yeah. So that was kind of my musical experience, apart from maybe just being in church. But at some point, my uncle bought me a radio, like a little, I don't even remember the brand or what it was called, but it was almost like a runner's radio, people used to have those before iPods were a big thing and stuff.
Did it have a strap that it like could strap to your arm? Was it one of those style?
Yeah. So he got me one of those, and I guess I felt obligated to try listening to the radio then, even though I wasn't into music. And I kind of started to get into Christian music, like listening to The Refuge here in Duluth, which actually no longer exists, but it was a really cool Christian rock station at the time that had a pretty good variety of music. And I remember also being exposed to the band AudioAdrenaline, both through the radio and through a youth pastor who played one of their songs in a message. And they were kind of the first band that I really gravitated towards and really liked. So they became my favorite band. And then I started listening to music a lot more. I bought my own kind of mini regular boombox thing at a garage sale, I think. And it was kind of funny, though, because I think I still, maybe emphasizing the nerd thing, I guess I thought music was nerdy or not cool. So I wouldn't blast music. I would play it quietly in my room, just so that I could hear it and maybe other people couldn't.
Funny. It was like an underground thing you were hiding from the world. So what are some, you mentioned AudioAdrenaline. What's your favorite AudioAdrenaline album?
Well, so the first album I actually ever bought was Until My Heart Caves In by AudioAdrenaline, which was their last album, and I think probably overlooked by a lot of people. But But yeah, that's a really awesome album with some great music, great lyrics, and you know, if you've never heard it, you should take a listen to it. So that has a special place in my heart. But otherwise, I think Bloom by AudioAdrenaline is probably my favorite because it's just really kind of down and dirty rock and roll. Like, it sounds like it could have been easily recorded in the 1970s. And yeah, it's got that vibe. Mark Stewart, up until he lost his voice, I would say he was one of the best rock singers just out there, period. And they had the riffs down and the vibe and everything. So
yeah, his voice had a great rasp to it, but they had an album, and maybe you can help me remember the name of it. It was kind of black and white looking on the cover, and had a kid, like a little kid doing like flexing his muscles.
Yeah, Underdog.
That's an AudioAdrenaline album that I actually really liked. I really liked their cover. What was that? They had a cover of...
Is it Let My Love Open the Door?
Yes, My Love Opened the Door. That's such a good song.
Yeah, I think it's by Pete Townsend from The Who.
So how about live experiences? Because you've done concert promotion and set up a lot of shows. What are some of your favorite concerts that you've been to?
Well, I was just talking to someone about this the other day, and it's interesting because I'm really into rock music, and probably most of the concerts that are my favorites are along those lines in some way. But probably my favorite concert I've ever been to was Andrew Peterson. He's kind of a Nashville singer-songwriter, folky. He has really deep lyrics. He's a Christian artist, and he's a great storyteller. I think he was really influenced a lot by Rich Mullins and some of the other great songwriters. But I was at North Central University at the time, and Bethlehem Baptist, which was actually John Piper's church, was like walking distance from the campus. And somehow I heard that this guy was playing there, and I didn't have anything better to do. So I just showed up on a whim, really not knowing who he was, not having heard his music. And yeah, he just started playing and just sharing these amazing stories and songs, and it was probably the most moving concert experience I've had. Like, I probably teared up at some point just because he was just sharing so deeply from his life and what was on his heart, and it was really relatable. So that I think is probably my most moving concert experience.
I love that. I love that your most moving concert experience wasn't due to massive wall of lights and all that stuff, but it was stories and songs and just an emotional event. That's cool.
Yeah, even to contrast that. And this is something I've seen change a lot over the years with artists, like where they've gotten more over the top, especially probably in the Christian industry, because I think maybe just because of limitations, the Christian industry couldn't do that production value and stuff. But I went and saw Switchfoot and Need to Breathe recently, which was amazing. And Switchfoot is one of my favorite bands. But they got up and they just played bare bones rock and roll, no frills. But Need to Breathe got up and they had this massive light show. And I was in the Armory in Minneapolis, which is a pretty big venue. But this LED screen went from floor to ceiling, and it was massive. And just, it was on the whole time, super bright. And I actually put on my sunglasses as a joke to one of my friends because it was so bright. But then I realized that even after putting them on, it was still too bright. So I left them on the rest of the show. But
wow, earplugs and sunglasses. That's like a sensory overload.
So I think worst part is that Need to Breathe is a really awesome live band. And I've seen them live before. And they don't need that. But I think it's just kind of the culture we're in of overstimulation, where artists feel like they need all the sound and lights, or at least the extra light stuff to draw people's attention.
Right. And it's a competitive market, I suppose. They're trying to compete and get people onto their show. What's the craziest show you've ever been to?
Maybe the craziest show I've been to was to see the band Trampled by Turtles, which is a band, like a bluegrass band from my hometown, Duluth. And they were playing on the U of M campus. So this was also when I was in college down in the cities. But I went to with my brother to this show on the campus, and it was in this kind of weird garage building. It was just so packed. in the garage going out that you really couldn't see the band. Like I stood on a picnic table and I was just able to kind of see part of the stage for a while. But at some point, security decided they were just going to lock everyone out who was outside. So they shut this garage door as there are like still people standing there. They're kind of panicking or upset or whatever. And they shut the garage door so anyone who's outside can't really hear or see the concert at all. And then there was like literally a riot. People were yelling and just banging up against the garage door. And then the police got called and had to come and like break up this mob of people outside of the Trampled by Turtles bluegrass show.
Crazy.
So, yeah. So that was a crazy experience.
A riot at a bluegrass show. That's awesome.
That's how you know it's a good band, probably, though. So,
man, I remember seeing way back in the day, it was at a Cornerstone Music Festival, a band called Ludacris, who eventually they got sued by the rapper Ludacris, so they changed their name to Norma Jean, and they put out a bajillion records under that name. But I had never seen a band that was that crazy on stage before, just thrashing, like probably not even playing the parts to the songs. So that was a pretty crazy experience.
I think the other craziest show I've been to was probably Flatfoot 56.
Oh, yeah.
At Sunshine. If you don't know them, they're really heavy Celtic punk, so kind of like Flogging Molly, but heavier. Yeah, they were playing on the metal stage at Sunshine Festival in this big hockey arena. And during a lot of the metal shows or some of the other punk bands, there's always a mosh pit, which is kind of wild enough on its own. But at this concert, they literally got the entire hockey arena moshing.
Yes.
Which, yeah, I've never seen before or since, but it was pretty crazy.
Slightly appropriate, right? It's a hockey rink. It's a violent place in general. So what inspired you to go a step further and start a podcast?
Well, kind of like you mentioned earlier on, I've been a concert promoter for a while, actually more than 10 years, I think. I started as a high schooler, like a junior in high school in 2010, I think, setting up some local concerts just for fun because I was into music and liked to do kind of behind scenes stuff. But yeah, I actually ended up going to school for music business because I became so invested in that, and it just kind of made sense. I was a venue director basically for 2 years, which was kind of an internship thing, so it was a temporary job. But after moving on, I kind of pursued youth ministry for a while, and then I ended up working with adults with disabilities, which is my main job now. So I've done that as my real job for the last 5 years. But I always kept setting up concerts just as a side job or a hobby and have really loved doing that. But then obviously COVID happened and that kind of shifted the landscape. And I just wasn't able to set up any concerts for 2 years. In fact, I'm setting up the first concert that I have since the whole COVID thing at the end of this month.
Awesome. Who's that?
It's with Mitch McVicker. He's a really amazing singer-songwriter artist and kind of a gospel artist. But
Cool.
He actually played with Rich Mullins, who people might be more familiar with. Rich wrote the song Awesome God or like Step by Step. I think Mitch actually co-wrote the song My Deliverer with him.
Cool. I love that song.
So yeah, Mitch is a really cool guy, and he had that experience. In fact, he was actually in the same car crash that killed Rich Mullins.
Wow.
And he probably should have died too, but he did survive and had a really long recovery, I think, and then went back to playing music. So yeah, I'm setting up actually 3 concerts with him, May 28th, 29th, and June 9th in Two Harbors, Duluth, and Hibbing, Minnesota.
That's great. So who have been some of your favorite people that you've interviewed so far for your show?
Well, I really loved interviewing all of them, honestly. But one of my favorite interviews was with my friend Eric Sear, and that's spelled C-Y-R. He has a band called Sear and the Cosmonauts. And he's a local artist here in Duluth and just does kind of folky rock music with lots of other genres thrown in. We had just a really great conversation that went from his music to faith stuff. He's Catholic, and that comes out in his music quite a bit. There are a lot of biblical references, so we talked about everything from that, and like Thomas Aquinas, he wrote a song about him, to, let's see, we started talking about Roald Dahl. I don't know how we went from Thomas Aquinas to Roald Dahl, but yeah, we had a really interesting conversation, and that was fun, and he's got some great music out, so I really enjoyed that. One of the other most fun interviews I've done so far was with Chris White, who is the director of the movie Electric Jesus. Which is kind of like a comedy movie about an 80s Christian metal band.
Yeah,
so,
I think you told me about that. I went and I watched the trailer, but I haven't watched the actual film yet. It looked funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. And I think it's also like maybe a lot more thoughtful and dramatic in some ways too than some people would expect. But yeah, it was a good movie, and I'm kind of big into old school Christian music and 80s music. Getting to talk with Chris for, I don't know, probably an hour and a half was just a blast. And I think both of us probably could have kept talking, but we decided to cut it off. So
yeah. What are some hidden musical gems that people need to check out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mentioned my friend Eric, who I interviewed, and he has an album under Sierra and the Cosmonauts, again, CYR, and it's called Songs to Sing Before We're Dead. So if you're looking for a really cool newer artist that's really in the folk rock vein, he's a great person to check out. And he's just a local guy. I mean, he plays out quite a bit, but I don't think he's gotten too much exposure, so most people don't know him. And you kind of posed this question to me before, so I was thinking about it. But I think a band that I love that almost no one knows about is the band Dogs of Peace. Have you ever heard of them?
I have heard of them, but I have never dug into their catalog much. Okay.
Well, yeah, they actually only have 2 albums. Their first album is called Speak, appropriately. And it's by Gordon Kennedy, who is, I think, the bassist for Whiteheart. And then, yeah, a bunch of other musicians, most of whom are big shot producers who have gone on to work with like larger pop artists. But yeah, it's really cool, classic rock sounding Christian album. And it kind of ranges from everything. Like, there are moments that remind me of Pink Floyd. There are times that it makes me think of like Don Henley, like from the Eagles a little bit, even maybe like Jack White and the Raconteurs. They kind of go across the spectrum of classic rock stuff. So that's actually one of my favorite albums ever, probably.
Cool.
Throw another 90s album out there. There's a band called Bloomsday, and they're another band that most people don't know, and I don't think I knew until probably some point in college, but they're a 90s alternative rock band, and they have an album called The Day the Colors Died. Interesting lyrics, and they have just this cool, fuzzy, alternative 90s sound. I think people who like maybe like Starflyer 59 or Poor Old Lou, which are both other obscure bands, but if you were into that kind of 90s fuzzy alt-rock vibe, you'd probably like Bloomsday.
Cool. I've never heard of Bloomsday before.
Yeah, you'll have to check them out.
Huh.
I think they're on YouTube, but I don't know if they're on Spotify.
Cool. There's a band that I really liked. I think they're 90s, early 2000s punk rock band called 121. And it was like ONE 21.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were on, I can't even remember. They weren't on Solid State Records. They were on the one that competes with Solid State Records. That other
like Face Down?
Face Down. I think they were on Face Down.
Mm-hmm. I
think they had 3 or 4 albums. And so good. And they sound a lot like Rancid.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think I might have had some of their music. I think you gave me a bunch of CDs like a few years ago now. And
okay.
Some of their stuff was in there.
There's a few of them in there because I love that band. So good.
What do you think is, and you play, I don't know how many people know what kind of music you play, but you've played everything from hardcore to punk to reggae to worship music, and now even like some kind of film score stuff. So you kind of covered all that.
Yeah, I've got multiple personalities like Moon Knight, so.
Yeah. I haven't seen that yet, so I guess I need to watch that.
Well, hey, where can people find your podcast?
My podcast, it's the DeVaney Music Podcast, DeVaney. And you can find it mainly on Spotify, I think also on Apple Music or Anchor. It's in some other places. It's on YouTube. I don't think I have the most recent episode up on YouTube, but yeah, you
Nice.
can find it all those places, and also Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Okay. Super cool. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. And Ian, thanks a lot for taking time to hang out and nerd out about music.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right. That was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Ian, for taking the time to sit down and talk about music. It was a lot of fun for me. If you want to hear the full, complete conversation, head over to the DeVaney Music Podcast. I think Ian is going to put up the rest of that episode, either the second half of it or just the conversation in its entirety. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be talking to you again really soon. Take care. Love you. God bless. Bye-bye.